Some reason my audio isn't working, but that is fine. We will jump right in. What I mean by audio is the background, the desktop audio. I have some stream beats going in the background, just some ambient music. But I'm going to jump in right in on this. Let me pull open my main camera. I'm going to check out all my settings too. So main camera, gameplay. All right. I think we're in business. We're going to try this. Today, I'm going to be listening and commenting on um, Richard Rohr. He's being interviewed by um, Tommy Rosen of Recovery 2.0. I like what Richard Rohr has to say. I think that these things need to be taken into consideration when we are talking about recovery and addiction. So different in many points of view, because obviously, because people keep returning back to the human condition, to continue to return back to these mind viruses, we need to just know one situation is static. So I am looking forward to what these gentlemen have to say. I might have to do some background, like background tweaking and stuff, but we'll get through it together. So here we go.
Recovery 2.0 conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I am simply delighted to be speaking with Father Richard Rohr. Richard is a globally recognized ecumenical teacher bearing witness to the universal awakening within Christian mysticism and the perennial tradition. Richard is Richard, thank you so much for lending your voice to the Recovery 2.0 conference.
It's my privilege. Thank you for having me.
Richard, if you followed your work for a long time now, really truly a dream come true for me
Okay,
to
so
speak and connect with
first
you
problem.
around your perspective.
Good thing I found it before the minute mark. I got my desktop audio figured out. I'm going to go back to the beginning and let's jump in from there.
Welcome to the Recovery 2.0 conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I am simply delighted to be speaking with Father Richard Rohr. Richard is a globally recognized ecumenical teacher bearing witness to the universal awakening within Christian mysticism and the perennial tradition. Richard is academic dean of the Living School for Action and Contemplation. The mission of the Living School is to produce compassionate and powerfully learned individuals who will work for positive change in the world based on awareness of our common union with God and all beings. Richard, thank you so much for lending your voice to the Recovery 2.0 conference.
It's my privilege. Thank you for having me.
Richard, if you followed your work for a long time now, really truly a dream come true for me to speak and connect with you around your perspectives on addiction and recovery from your experience and working with people all these years. Can you begin today and shed some light on your perspectives around this thing people call addiction in all of its forms?
Well, as I say in my book, Breathing Underwater, I think what religions at the higher levels.
By the way, got to get that book. If let me pull open another tab. I'm going to just for your great book. Great book. Well worth the look. So
Was that there's one universal addiction, and that is that we're all addicted to our way of thinking.
boom. One of the biggest things that every human being needs to take into consideration.
And that becomes so rigid and usually very dualistic. It's what they call all or nothing thinking in some recovery programs. And it's not just people who are formally addicted to drugs or drink or anything else, but it's really all of us. And so that became my entranceway. I'm a teacher of contemplative prayer primarily. Uh, and maybe I haven't earned the right to talk about recovery. I've never been in a 12-step program, but I've counseled. I probably should be, but but I've counseled so many people and spiritually directed so many people, and learned from them. And I see what the
which is huge. I wish more individuals that the creator has called to be his servants when it comes to learning are not learning to serving human beings and explaining spiritual principles. I wish that they would all have what he's talking about here, this attitude of learning. This person across from you brings experience, strength, and hope too. They bring a different way of being. And so we should all realize that that we're related in this human journey and that we can learn from one another. Yeah. So I know that there are some relatives out there that are going to be like, "Oh, bro, man, Richard Rohr, you do know he's a Catholic." Well, I don't care. Right now, the the um the opioid crisis in this country isn't getting any better, and we need to grab from all places. And so, why don't you just sit down and listen?
patterns are from that.
Hmm.
And so that's the context from which I'm speaking.
Thank you. So for me as well, in the work that I'm doing, I've tried to help people to expand their perspective on addiction, so that they might actually include themselves in this category.
Yes, I'm doing the same.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm finding that once you do include yourself in that category, and we'll go with your perspective of we're certainly all addicted to our own way of seeing things.
That's right.
Once you're there, um, what's the end goal? Where are we trying to get to? If we're all stuck in this core addiction, which is to our own way of thinking, and that manifests itself in a lot of pain and suffering, a lot of maladaptive behaviors, if you will. Once we put down those maladaptive behaviors, that doesn't seem like the goal unto itself.
No, no, that's very well put. You know, recovery is simply recovery. What's the positive thing we're aiming for? Now, those of us from the world of religion would say the goal is union, union with God, union with reality, union with yourself. And so the first thing we got to do is get ourselves out of the way. So that might be called the work of recovery. That we're filled with our usually strongly held beliefs and opinions, which is really to be in love with ourselves, not with God, you see, or with reality.
Hmm.
And so I thank you for putting it that way, because I've met people who have formally overcome their substance addiction, for example, but their rigid way of thinking and
Hmm.
processing reality is still totally in place.
Hmm.
So that's why just overcoming the substance addiction perhaps is just the first stage. That's all.
Yes. In my own experience with this, I came through fairly severe drug addiction. Thank God I survived it. Had a lot of love and support to get onto a healing of recovery. In fact, those behaviors were put aside. And then I noticed that my life got quite a bit better. And so for a number of years, I kind of I floated on that improvement.
Yes.
And so the words might be, oh, well, Tommy, you're doing so much better than you were.
Mm-hmm.
But as I took a closer look, you see, the universe made me take a closer look. The way it does that, at least in my experience, is through pain and suffering.
That's right.
I
I'm afraid so.
The School of Hard Knocks, right there. Also known, well, when you get older, as the University of Hard Knocks. My goodness. Um, Not even 10 minutes in, and these guys are hitting on so many points. I don't want to try to to pause it so much, but it is my channel. So I'm gonna pause when I feel like it's appropriate. But again, these gentlemen are hitting on so many good things.
True.
Yeah. So through my pain and suffering, I took a closer look and I noticed.
I feel like in addiction circles and recovery treatment programs, things like that, support groups, we all talk about how we learn the hard way, right? And so maybe we should just take into consideration what's being said here by Tommy in his discussion with Father Richard, that each one of us, it's a human thing. We learn the hard way. I remember I tell people when I do my lectures, I'll say, in Dakota Way, I hear the holy men and the medicine men praying this prayer. It's consistent prayer. They say, Tunkashi no wakan tako shimadawo. Grandfather, the Creator, have pity on me. I'm just a common man. If we realize that's the beginning point, that should make us humble and enter into these places and to help one another, realizing that it's a human problem. So,
Oh, Tommy, you're smoking cigarettes.
Well,
You're involved in difficult relationships, romantic relationships, and other relationships. You are stuck in a strange, confusing relationship with money. You gamble, you overspend. So all these areas of my life that are super important, I find that I'm still completely out of order. I'm still confused. I'm not there yet. And so the next layer of the onion is okay, now I've put down my first layer of addictions, but I'm still not happy. I'm
yeah.
still not content. So where are we moving to? Where are we trying to get to?
Well, it's going to sound simplistic, but we are trying to get to a foundational happiness, not a superficial, I feel good about myself, but something that doesn't come and go, that isn't up and down.
Mm,
And what we're all facing in all of our addictive patterns is that deep sense of non-satisfaction or emptiness that we call unhappiness. So the goal is, I mean, Jesus says this in the Gospels, I want to give you joy and the more abundant life. It's unfortunate that we push that all off in most Christian interpretations to something called heaven later. And that just pretty much destroyed the transformative power
mm,
of so much of the Christian religion and religion in general.
mm,
If it's all going to come later, and all you're doing is playing a game now to get the prize later, you don't really get into transformative spirituality.
mm,
And that's why I've come to admire the recovery movement so much. Is you're talking at your best about transformation
mm.
now, not heaven later, not heaven later.
Yes.
That's key. That's really key.
Mm,
And I think heaven now is called happiness.
mm,
Finding a foundational contentment
mm,
that I don't keep grabbing out there. That'll make me happy. That'll make me happy. Either it's an inside job, or you'll recognize there's nothing external to yourself that can
mm.
finally satisfy you. Nothing. Nothing.
So ultimately, you're going to have to look within.
Yeah, as much of a cliche as that sounds like, it's been said by mystics and saints and prophets in all of the world religions.
Mm. Is that, in your opinion, what Jesus may have meant when he said the kingdom of heaven is within?
Of course, exactly.
boo! Oh my goodness.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm,
But we made the soul something we saved, even that word, saved till later, instead of discovered now.
mm.
Can you feel the difference?
Oh
So
my
I
God, yes.
think that's what Jesus means. You're right. Yeah.
Can we? Do you mind if we speak a little bit about the teachings of Christ?
Well, of course, that's my field. So,
I have no particular religious affiliation.
yeah,
I was born Jewish. I'm not observant in that way, but I love so much about the Jewish faith and the Jewish traditions.
yeah,
I love so much about the teachings of Jesus Christ.
I do too. There has been so much that his people have taught me in the season of mourning. It is so good, and in my recovery. Uh, 24 years of sobriety celebrated on November 29th of 2024. So I've learned a lot from his people and from Jesus, but looking at him a different way in this time of my life.
I love so much about the teachings of the Buddha. I've investigated quite a bit in Eastern philosophy, Eastern spirituality, and I'm actually finding that in a lot of these traditions, Islam as well, Sikhism as well, Sufism as well, I'm seeing a different expression of the same ultimate truths.
Yes.
So I just want to come at it from the perspective of, from your work and your perspective, there are certain things that I will hear and read. For example, the meek shall inherit the earth. Other of the Beatitudes, some of the teachings are, if you get underneath them in sort of a spiritual way, which is one of the reasons I love your work, is because you do that. There's a deeper meaning to all of these things than what the words on their surface would
Absolutely.
seem to imply.
That's the real meaning. That's it.
Okay, can we?
Literalism is the lowest level of meaning, the least level of meaning.
Okay.
Oh, I don't want to go back. Literalism is the lowest level of meaning.
To the spiritual level. Good.
Okay. Now, so can we talk about, for example, the meek shall inherit the earth, and what the deeper meaning of that might be?
I think in recent decades there's been a discovery, a deep discovery of the meaning of vulnerability. People like Brene Brown are doing such good work in that area to unpackage this whole thing. But I think the word that is translated meek in our English Bibles from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount could well be translated as blessed are the vulnerable. You see, only in the position of vulnerability does growth happen. As long as you're absolutely self-assured, I don't need you, you don't need me, I don't respect you, you don't respect me, no growth is going to happen. Vulnerability is always that opening of the heart space and the body space and the mind space so that something else can get in. So I think it's no surprise that's right at the beginning of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, because it's central. It's central.
And what the inheriting of the earth. So if we can be vulnerable, if we can be humble, if we can be open, we get to inherit this earth. What does that mean? The confusing part for me and for many has been, well, is that abundance? Is that money? Are we inheriting a piece of real estate? What comes as a result of this openness?
I would say, no, it isn't talking about a piece of real estate. It really isn't. I mean, there are 6 billion of us on this planet. If we each want to inherit.
All right, I'm going to be switching some audio stuff here. Stand by. I'm going to put myself on mute. All right, you're going to ride with me. Let's see if I have this set up right. Okay. Looks like it's not picking up my other device. Let me make sure. Awesome. Okay. Let me go back 5 seconds, 10 seconds.
No, it isn't talking about a piece of real estate. It really isn't. I mean, there are 6 billion of us on this planet. If we each want to inherit the earth, that's what I mean by the
Literal.
literalism.
Yes.
It gets you nowhere. But let's translate it this way. You will get all you need. You will get a sense of inner satisfaction, inner contentment. That's to inherit the earth when I don't need all of that stuff anymore. My own father, St. Francis, that was the heart of his spiritual experience, the non-needing of material possessions because his soul was so utterly satisfied. That would be full freedom, I think, full sanctity. We see that reflected in the Buddhist monk. We see that reflected in the Sufi mystic, and it's always at the higher levels the same conclusion.
Mm, mm. In the 12-step universe, we often read the St. Francis prayer.
Yes.
So that there's a true love and an appreciation of that energy and that concept within 12-step reality.
Yes, I know that.
Yes.
Right.
So in your book, Breathing Underwater, which is incredible, by the way, and everybody who's watching this, if you're on a path of recovery or anyone you know has been affected by addiction, please do pick up this book and read it. Can you speak a little bit about the book and what moved you to write it?
Well, I guess it was, I mean, the first cassettes I made almost 25 years ago entitled Breathing Underwater, that eventually became the book, were actually inspired by what I spoke of before. That so many people who came to me, who may be halfway into the conversation, would finally admit, I don't know why it takes admission, but admit that they were in a recovery program. I again and again found them to be more humble and more honest. And when I again and again found this pattern, that the most humble and most honest people were people who again and again had hit bottom, as it were. And frankly, when you're involved in the field of religion, so many people who come using exclusively religious vocabulary, religious jargon, churchy words. I don't want to be unkind to anybody or unfair to anybody, but again and again, I found that when they talked, there was there was no substance to it. It was just words. It was just uh, vocabulary.
No emotional connection.
Well, and a lot is lost in translation because you have to figure out what is being communicated to you. What is this lingo, and so that's what I'm hearing from Father Richard Rohr.
Yeah, maybe that's the way of saying it. And they didn't seem to be there. It was the presenting of a persona. Whereas what I found in people who'd gone through recovery, who'd learned to breathe underwater, that became my metaphor. Um, there was, as you just put it, there was a self there that I feel was being presented to me. I could have an honest conversation. I didn't need to fear about offending their orthodoxy or you know, I mean, to talk to religious people. I've been a priest for almost 50 years. I mean, but to talk to religious people is often a minefield. It's just a minefield. And I again and again felt I was not in that minefield, but in a field of compassion and mercy, because they had found themselves so in need of mercy. So again and again, they were quite willing to be conduits of mercy for other people. And I just loved it. I wanted to take these people to myself. Where did you get this freedom?
Thank you.
So that's why for years, and I call the work of Bill Wilson and the 12-step program the American contribution to the history of spirituality.
Oh,
And why it's so American, Tommy, is that Americans are very pragmatic. Their first question is, does it work?
Right.
And what the, and what the 12-step program did is brought the whole Judeo-Christian theology out of the clouds and brought it to workability.
boom. Real quick, that is why when I'm around my brothers and sisters who are fellow disciples, believers, and followers of the man Jesus, I'll say we would do ourselves well by going and spending time in some of these support groups and just listening to what they have to say. I think that we would put on different lenses and we would hear a different lingo and be like, I hadn't thought of it that way. They're not scrubbing the teaching. A lot of times the different perspective they're at is so good. That's what I hear Father Richard Rohr saying here. And if you are a believer and you have not got to an AA meeting or an NA meeting, a lot of those meetings are open. A good majority of them are open, and you can go there. Families Anonymous, um, Al-Anon, ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. A lot of these are open. Just look for, when you're on the website, just look for the word open on there, and you can just go and observe. And when it comes to you, give your name, and I'm just here to observe and listen.
Is it changing people?
Hmm.
One more thing to add on to that. It's just maybe a playing with words, but I found so much of organized religion, and mind you, I'm still a priest in good standing, so I'm not trying to present myself as a rebel or something. But I found so much of organized religion transactional. Do this transaction, this attendance at a service, or this sacrament, or this bar mitzvah, or this baptism, whatever it might be. Whereas what I find the 12-step program is, it's transformational, not just transactional, if that makes any sense.
That's so good. I'm gonna go back 5 seconds so we can catch that last part. But one of the things that I noticed right away with um, 12 steps, AA, was it is what he's describing it good, but I'm just, from my point of view, one of the things that caught my attention is within the body, within Jesus' body, he's the head. But a lot of times we, as his disciples, followers, and believers, we we make having a relationship with the creator, like Father Rohr is saying, transactional, basically making him into, as one theologian said, we're making God into a cosmic vending machine. I pump in all these things that that Father Richard Rohr was talking about, and then I pull the lever, and then I get out, the good things or whatever. So, man, such. I, what are we at? 16, almost 20 minutes in, and he's already diving pretty deep with Tommy Rosen on Recovery 2.0.
Transformational, not just transactional, if that makes any sense.
Well, yes, absolutely. The transactional seems a little bit, well, it is certainly like a business deal.
Yeah.
And it also feeds into that other malady of people who struggle with addiction, which is, well, people in general, that if-then thinking.
Going back 5 seconds. Uh, transactional. Transactional, and we've made it into, let's hear it again.
Struggle with addiction, which is, well, people in general, that if-then thinking. Well, if I do this, then something positive will result. It can even be very mundane. Like I notice that people seem to always need an end to do a thing. So I'll go to the gym because somehow it will help my body down the road look a certain way or be a certain way. But very rarely do you hear somebody say, I'm going to go to the gym because I love the experience of being there and doing these things, just the being of it.
Yes.
I think we're missing that to a great extent in our society, and especially now with all of the technology that our young people, well, everybody's involved in. It seems like the distractions are going up, not down.
Oh, definitely, no doubt. Yeah.
Yes. Can you tell me in your work, the work at the Center for Action and Contemplation, you are seeing mostly people who would consider themselves to be religious people?
I would say, for the first 25 years, we largely did an internship program. We take people to live among the marginalized. We drive them. We're 3 hours from the border in Mexico to live with the poor and see how the questions they ask are so different than our middle class or upper class questions. Now we've morphed into what we call the living school. I was just teaching 48 of our students all last week. And I think that's correct, that most of them came at least from the world of religion. Now, often they're in recovery from religion. the different kind of recovery programs. They're not in reaction against it, but neither are they, you know, bona fide Sunday go to meeting Catholics or Christians or Jews.
What Father Rohr is highlighting here, and you would think it would be accepted within those groups, people that are trying to have a relationship with the Creator, trying to be continue to be learners on planet Earth from their teacher. You'd think that they would be like, okay, if this is making them a better human being, and they're living the attribute, or they're living that way of being of 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient. I'm patient with them. I'm kind in every circle. And they're living out these things that are just tenets of the faith. You'd think that people would be okay with that, but a lot of people are like, you're what we call, and I've been called this, you're what we call a liberal Christian, and they get kind of in your face. It's like, so this is bad.
They're in that what I call healthy period of self criticism.
I'm noticing a lot, particularly in the last year, and I think there are cycles of this. I'm noticing a lot of negativity toward 12-step programs in the press. There are a couple of, oh yeah, a couple of,
Oh,
the argument is always the same. The concern is the same, that this is a spiritual or religious organization which has no science behind it. They cite dismal success rates.
5 years ago, he spoke this. 5 years ago. And it was like that before it too. I remember somebody coming up to me and telling me that, hey, man, they don't need what's in that big AA book. They need what's in this book or whatever, and all of their answers. So what Tommy Rosen is highlighting here is really good stuff.
Within 12-step rooms, and I'm always, and many of my colleagues are always on the defending side of the very good work that's being done in 12-step programs. And my comment has been to people, you don't want to wake up tomorrow morning in a world where there's no 12 steps. Like, I don't think you'd want to be in that world in 2016. And I try to bring to people's attention how important this process is. The people who make these statements against are usually people who really ask for and desire scientific proof behind the process of transformation that's taking place when a person gets out of addiction and into recovery. They want numbers.
sure.
They want a replicable process that can be proven over time. And I say, I want that too.
Which makes no sense, because a lot of the individuals that I've experienced are individuals that come from the faith community, capital, come from the faith community, and they want all this proof. Why are you in the faith community then? You know, if anything, they'd be my relatives, fellow followers of Christ, believers and disciples of Christ, are becoming better arguers, and it doesn't really model. It doesn't, Jesus says, "Why do you call me good? There's only one who's good." And I imitate what the Father's doing. So if that's a way of being, then that means that I need to imitate what my teacher's doing, because you know what I mean? So walking around and questioning things, prove it, prove it, prove it, prove it, is totally the opposite of. So this is such a good, for those of you that are watching this channel. I'll continue to find these little nuggets. I don't know how I'll put them on here, but um, I'll put more of this type of material out there. There's some good Orthodox stuff out there too. I'll put that on here, but we'll finish this one up.
Yeah, I want that too.
But we're talking about human transformation.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're talking also about a self-proclaimed spiritual program. You must run up against this in religious circles and spiritual circles, when people are saying, well, why should I do this? What's the proof? What can you?
Yeah. Well, that's the birth of the rational scientific mind, which has really only been with us for about 300 years. And it's given much to society. I'm not against it. In fact, we're now seeing a wonderful confluence of religion and science for the first time.
Hmm.
But those who are completely committed to one way of knowing reality, they've got to realize their lens is actually rather narrow, you know, and rather small. It doesn't recognize all the levels of transformation that the soul needs and that the soul allows. So they've determined their criteria by their own mind. Here's the dualistic mind again. And then inside those criteria, judged the 12-step program to be wanting.
Hmm.
They would probably do the same with most religion, and I'm used to that.
Hmm.
But what the contemplative mind actually does, which is what we teach here, is broaden your lens considerably about what life is, what death is, what real is, what unreal is. And until they see that, I'm afraid they're going to critique everything, themselves included,
Hmm.
by a very limited set of judgments
Yes.
that are not in the end very helpful.
Hmm.
It's always either or thinking. It's always all or nothing thinking.
Yes, rather than yes and.
That's right. That's right.
I like what you mentioned, the confluence of religion and science.
Yes.
Have you seen some examples of that you can cite?
Well, it's quantum physics, for example, that is just so exciting to so many of us who, for example, quantum physics now can prove what we would have called translocal effect, that you can touch this electron here and it affects an electron over there.
Hmm.
And, now we used to call that miracles or praying or
Right, right.
sending good energy into the world. And that was laughable to many people under the limited scientific paradigm of Newtonian physics, of cause and effect.
Yes.
As physics itself becomes bigger and bigger, now we understand things like quantum entanglement.
Hmm.
That's a fancy word for that love here matters over there. And
Hmm.
hatred, if I'm walking around hateful all day, in fact, I'm affecting the universe. Now, a lot of us used to think that was airy fairy kind of poetic talk. Now, quantum physics says no, it's probably true.
Hmm.
It's that
Actually provable.
yeah, that what you and I think matters, and we can't afford to be walking around thinking negative, hateful thoughts all
Hmm.
day. In fact, science from neuroscience, to just move to a different level, neuroscience now says that negative thoughts are like Velcro. We can, they just, there's an attraction in the mind to something negative.
Hmm.
Positive thoughts are like Teflon. In fact, if you don't savor, hold on to, enjoy, participate in a moment of happiness, in a moment of goodness, they'll even go so far as to say, for 10 or 15 seconds,
Hmm.
it just slides off. And I know that from my own watching myself,
Hmm.
that I will find it, and this is damnable, really, so much easier, so much easier to hold on to negativity, people who've offended me, people who've done me wrong. God, I can play that out for years.
Hmm.
And those moments of pure grace.
So can I. I have all the merch too. I got the hat, the sweater, the coffee mug, the water bottle. I got all the merch of holding on to what Father Rohr is talking about. Holding on to that stuff for years. I've been there, done that. I rode that ride many times.
And loveliness, where people look into my eyes and thank me. Oh, yeah, I forget it.
Hmm.
I take it for granted. I think I'm entitled to it. So, good neuroscience is saying the positive is like Teflon, sorry to say.
Hmm.
The negative is like Velcro. We now have scientific evidence that that is true.
Hmm. I'd like to speak with you about contemplation.
Oh, I'd love to.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think so few people have had experience of it. Can you talk to me about the word, its meaning, and how you use it in your practices and in your life?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I could talk for hours, so I've got to,
Yes.
this is the main thing I teach. All right. What all religions of the world discovered at the higher levels, like Kabbalistic Judaism, for example. There, you can just be in it for the belonging system, which is where almost all of us start. I was born Catholic, so I find myself Catholic, and that's my little tribe, and I stay there. And that of itself does not assure any high level of transformation. But what people who really stayed on inner journeys, seeking of God, seeking of truth, seeking of the good, the true, and the beautiful,
Hmm.
discovered is that there really was a broader way of accessing reality.
Hmm.
Now, I think historically in the biblical tradition, Jewish and Christian, we would have just called that prayer. That when Christians say, I'm going to pray about something, they actually ideally meant, I'm going to put on a different head. Instead of this egocentric, what's in it for me? How can I profit and make money?
Hmm.
I'm going to pray about it.
Hmm.
Now, the word prayer became so trivialized by its functional use to announce things to God or ask things from God that we frankly found it less and less helpful.
Hmm.
Already by the third century of the Christian era, the desert fathers and mothers in Egypt and Syria and in Palestine and eastern Turkey came up with another word because they said the word prayer just wasn't getting people there anymore.
Hmm.
And already that's when the word contemplation was first introduced to at least Christian vocabulary.
Hmm.
It was held largely inside of the monasteries where we were often, not always, but often taught this different way of seeing. Now, it's what the Eastern religions would call third eye seeing, not the dualistic either or, all or nothing. uh, that mind, Tommy, is always argumentative.
Hmm.
It's inherently argumentative.
Oh my goodness. Probably why Jesus had to get in people's faces in the teaching, and Father Rohr is probably going to get at this, but why do you see the speck of dust in your brother's eye and not see the log coming from your own eye? Um, First, remove the log from your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to help your brother remove um, the the speck out of his. I like what he's saying here about argumentative. We're so caught up in this here that we don't see that it's obstructed. The vision is obstructed. It's interesting that Christ, when he says, "My teacher," says, um, how does he, how does he, how does he say it? He talks about, when he talks about removing that obstruction from your sight. Um, you know that there's clarity that comes. It's interesting that when that clarity comes, when the person starts, like, they remove themselves out of the picture, they remove that thing that is important to them, that thing they've dug their heels into, they've removed, their lenses, what they were seeing the world, to try to understand and listen to what was being told to them. And in that, they they get a sight, and I think that that's interesting. When I understand, I tell people, "Oh, I see," and I'm saying I understand. So I hope that he'll unpack this more in his book. It is. Let me look at it real quick, and I'll tell you how long the book is. The audiobook. I highly recommend the audiobook. Um, I got. I have it on repeat. Usually, when I'm done with the audiobook, I'll get it off my device. This thing has stayed on my phone. It's something that I go back to. I go back to often. So let me look how long. Title details. Then we'll jump back in here. And it is how long? Come on, tell me how long. It's not telling me how long. Here, I went all this. all this length to tell you how long this is. Here, let me turn this down, and I'm going to try another way. I'm going to rewind it all the way back to the beginning and see what happens. Let me go to opening credits and then start over. Okay, so it's almost 3.5 hours long. So, but I'm telling you what, I learn best by auditory. So when I'm hearing somebody, it's not that I don't take notes. It's not that I can't read. I like reading. Tons of books over there. I just choose to not have them in my behind me, so you know how smart I am. I told a friend recently, I was like, I make sure that my books aren't behind me. I don't care. I don't want anything that says anything that I've done, any learning I've acquired, whatever. So that's why I try to make this background things that I like that are interesting, and there's a story there. One day I'll tell it. There's a story with the drums over there. So there's a story with the two blankets that are over there. So, but I hope he deep dives on this, and you know, yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna jump. We're just gonna jump right back in. This is getting to be a long video.
Because once you position and live inside of the principle of two, either or, you always, for some dang reason, you always have to choose sides.
Mm.
And you judge one side to be better and one side to be worse. This is reaching absolutely stupid levels. I mean, look at our politics.
Mm.
It just makes you want to cry.
Mm.
We're not producing people of higher level wisdom than Republican and Democrat, as if substantial truth can be found there. And we do the same with male, female, black, white, Jew, Christian, and just choose your poison,
Mm. Yes.
The contemplative mind, quite simply put, I have a whole book on this. It's called the Naked Now book. Yeah.
Mm.
The contemplative mind, if you just want a descriptor, a clear, non pious, non poetic descriptor of what it's like to be a contemplative, you do not frame things either or. It's
Mm.
non dual thinking, where you leave the field open, you don't choose sides, you just let it be. I don't need to categorize you as Jewish or you as white or you as anything. You're just Tommy.
Mm.
Right? And when you let things be what they are in their nakedness and present themselves to you, and I take away from myself my need to judge things up or down, to categorize things in or out, right or wrong, with me or against me, that is freedom.
Mm.
That, believe it or not, is the only way you will ever be happy. If
It sounds like it leads towards compassion and forgiveness
you got it,
and
you
love.
got it. Yeah.
It also sounds like the opposite of the addictive mind.
Yeah, you've said it. That's exactly true. It's so obvious once you tell it to people. And we have all these universities and all these lawyers that we're seeing in the political debates who they're being given without knowing it a PhD in dualistic thinking.
Mm.
Thinking that education is going to get them there. And I'm not against education. I couldn't be talking if I wasn't well educated. But education is not the same as transformation.
Boom! Did you hear that? I'm going back.
Talking if I wasn't well educated. But education is not the same as transformation, you
Mm.
see?
Mm.
And that's why we still need healthy religion. Healthy
Mm.
religion, not unhealthy. Unhealthy religion is more a part of the problem
Mm.
than it is the solution. But healthy religion talks the language of transformation, just like the recovery movement does.
Mm. Thank you.
So interesting that he says that in the New Testament, we're told that knowledge puffs up. So we have a lot of people running around right now in this country with fat heads. They've just filled it with all this knowledge, and it's a weird flex. I used to do it. Takes one to know one. I used to do it, and so, um, but that's what wisdom is. You see what you're doing, right? That's why we need to hear from the elders right now, whatever community we're in. We need to hear from the old timers and support groups. We need to hear from the elders back on my reservation, back in um, the other council fires that are down here on Standing Rock, Sioux Tribe. We need to we need to learn from one another once again and quit walking around with we have this thing figured out. You need us. It's so icky.
So much. So from this perspective, prayer, you're looking at prayer and contemplation as the same?
Let me give you the historic distinction that goes back to the 10th century in the Christian world.
Yes.
I'm going to use Latin words, but don't be. Oratio was spoken prayer. That was the lowest level, but that's where you have to start. You say prayers, all right? Most people never get much beyond that, which is fine. The second level is meditatio, where you think and reflect and you ponder upon spiritual ideas, but you still use your mind, all right? So oratio, spoken, meditatio, thought, contemplatio was the third level. And that's where, believe it or not, you go beyond thinking. As even Malcolm Gladwell says in his book Blink, where you think without thinking. It's an intuitive grasping of the fullness of a moment without putting it inside of the calculating mind. You see? So I'm saying it builds on prayer, but in fact it goes beyond saying prayers or even thinking prayers. It goes beyond thinking. I know that scares a lot of people. You've actually done it in moments of great love, in moments of great suffering. You actually are apprehending reality beyond your mind.
In yogic circles, in some yogic circles, we would call that Vedanta.
I bet, yes.
Which means the end of knowledge. There's nowhere else to go from there.
Same thing, of course.
Yes, I really appreciate that. Love that. I want to talk now about a word that I also think has been so misunderstood over the years, and that word is grace. And I'll particularly speak about it in terms of people, how they use it within recovery circles.
By the way, you're getting a real live reaction. I haven't listened to this all the way through, you know? I feel like on the fly is the best, or else it's not a reaction, right? So I am really intrigued. That's probably, you probably saw that in my eyes. I was like, I'm pleasantly surprised he's going into this understanding of grace because I think it's needed everywhere.
So my story at the moment of my ego death, spiritual death, when I was at my bottom with regards to drug and alcohol use. It's 1989. I'm done. And the way that I know I'm done is I actually can't conceive of the next move.
Wow.
There's nowhere else to go now.
Yes.
There's no person there that's going to help me.
Good.
There's no money. There's certainly no girl that will come near me. Anything that I would use in the outside world that could help me get past the pain and suffering of this moment is gone. That for me was the first bottom. And I pick up the phone, I call my father. I'm going to tell him everything but the truth. He cuts right to the chase. He says, I know you're on drugs. I know you're on drugs. I need you to seek help now. I say, no, I'm not going to do it. I won't go. I don't want to do it. Not for me, not me, not me. And he starts to cry.
Wow.
Second time I heard my father cry in my life, and it got through. And there was a little door opened, and I'll call it, I'll say that grace shone through in that moment. And I said, Dad, I will go. Please stop crying.
Wow.
I'll get some help.
How beautiful.
A friend of mine who had been with me in these last days and who was, I'll just say, as sick as I was, didn't have that moment.
Mm.
He would spend the next 25 years suffering in and out of homeless shelters, jail, um, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. People would look back and say, well, Tommy, you were graced. It was the grace of God that gave you an opportunity to get sober. Now, it's a mystery.
Yes.
Of course it's going to fall under the category of mystery, but I always wonder what are the precursor elements, if any, to grace happening?
Yeah.
Why will some be saved and some will not be saved? And by the way, just because I'm alive in this physical frame, is that a better outcome than my poor friend who had his suffering and his pain and then ended up dying? It's so many questions come around this idea of grace. Anything you can share about that, I would be so grateful for.
I just learned, and I want to see. I bet you. I have a feeling that Father Rohr is going to talk about this, but I want to see if I learned correctly when the idea of grace came to me. So, previous life, serving as a staff pastor, you were taught that grace meant unmerited favor. And when I started expanding my horizons, and was like, well, this can't be I wonder what my relatives in other parts of the family are thinking when it comes to, because I was adopted into this family. Like most people that become Christ followers, you're adopted into this family through the sponsor that is Jesus Christ. And so I'm like, well, I know that they're Lutheran believers. So I started like consuming Lutheran stuff. Don't people, this is why I got the label liberal Christian. um, I started reading a book and I'm trying to see if it's right there for me. I'm not seeing it offhand. In fact, it's right there. I see it. I'm going to go off screen here. Let me see if I can grab it. There it is. All right. You get to benefit from my aha moments. So one of the books was, I'll get to this one that's in my hand right now. One of the books was newsletter type. I can't remember but it was a gentleman, a podcast called, can't remember what the podcast was. This gentleman fell a while, years back, but he talked about grace being one-way love, and then he started mentioning things in his podcast, and this was one of the authors he mentioned, William Horden, living by grace. So hopefully you can see that. I'll pull it up. That's what it looks like if you want to check it out. But living by grace. But it opened up my understanding. I might have to flip through this again. I underlined a lot through this book. Unreal. Um, but my understanding of it now, before I unpause, is this: that grace is one-way love, and I like that. It means that I bring nothing to the table. It's just one-way love. And so got that from our Lutheran relatives through, I think this gentleman was at the time, I can't remember the church, the denomination he was part of, but the main point is that I learned a different definition of grace from going out, launching into the larger family of Christ followers.
Well, I believe grace is the theme of themes of the Bible. And it starts already in Exodus, where on the edge of the Red Sea, uh, Yahweh tells Moses, Moses, you don't have to do anything. You just have to stand still. I will do the fighting for you. There it is, Exodus 14:14. Now that theme keeps getting refined and purified and returns and returns and returns. And of course, for us as Christians, we believe Jesus personifies it. But where did he learn it? He learned it from his Jewish tradition, because Jesus was nothing more than a supreme Jew that he
Mm.
learned it from his own ancestors. Now, it, I'm glad you used the word mystery because I grace is in the title of 3 of my books,
Mm.
and I just wrote I have daily meditations online, and I just wrote 2 weeks on the theme of grace, so I almost don't know where to start.
I'm sorry to hit you, blindside you here.
I love to talk about it. First of all, it's outside any realm of accountability, worthiness, earning, attaining, achieving. There's no performance principle whatsoever that can make grace happen. It always comes from nowhere, precisely. And yet, we have to say there, there's a necessary opening. Now, probably your love for your father allowed that opening to happen on
Mm.
that precious day, you know? So something made your heart space open. You didn't earn that, but it does matter. Now, in the Christian vocabulary, that became imaged. The metaphor for it was in the yes of Mary. There's no statement of Mary being better, smart, worthy, anything. She just, yes. Maybe the yes is just 1%.
Mm.
Now, but even that yes, many of our saints would say, is engendered by grace.
Mm.
You didn't make your father call on that day. How did that happen
Mm.
too?
Mm.
So
Mm.
the older I get, the more I see that grace made everything happen.
Mm.
And yet I still want to say that your yes matters.
Mm.
For me, Tommy, you used the word saved, and that word also is so misused, but I think salvation is not a question of if, it's just a question of when.
Mm.
And I believe even your dear friend, the hell he went through in his lifetime, that was his transformational process.
Mm.
And I have to believe the moment when his eyes were open was probably the great allure that happens at the moment of death when we see what it all really meant,
Mm.
and that we didn't have to fight it so much.
Mm.
But I do think a lot of people put off heaven till the moment of death.
Mm.
And once we think of it that way, it's not either or. Like I say, it's a question not of if, but when. When are you going to get it? You were lucky enough
Mm.
to surrender to grace a little bit earlier.
Mm.
You're just lucky. You're blessed.
Right. There's no possible way I could take any credit for it. That's the point.
Same with me. Same with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I recognize, sometimes in some of our Eastern circles, we'll say, we remind each other, you are not the doer.
That's right. I use that very phrase. You are not the doer.
And yet there's actions that need to be taken.
That's right.
It's so confusing.
Yeah.
That's what makes it beautiful. I say that in my lectures all the time. I'm like, if I could explain this fully, what I'm trying to get you to consider about the same faith that you put in the drug and drink, you can put into your relationship with the creator, and things will start to, I can talk to you about what my experience is with prayer and reading and being involved in the things of scripture and all that. But that's just one point of view. You have to explain. If I could fully explain what these things are, I mean, it loses some of its mystery and beauty. And so I agree with what Tommy's saying here.
Yeah.
Well, there was a phrase that some of the desert fathers, you never catch the wild ass by running after it, but only those who run after it catch the wild ass.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a paradox. How can both be true?
Yes.
Your running matters, and yet your running does not achieve it.
Hmm.
See, the dualistic mind has to turn off to
Yes.
understand that.
Yes, yes, yes. In the path of the 12 steps, of course, and in, I think, pretty much every spiritual or religious tradition, there is a movement towards being of service to others. In fact, in the history and the founding and the seed concept of the 12-step program is the idea that, as it's written in the book, one alcoholic has to help another alcoholic in order for this thing to actually work. Like the magic is in the helping of another who shares a common malady to what you've come through. Can you speak about service and
Yeah.
in your work and as you see it, the importance of it?
Thank you for bringing that up. I think without that element, Tommy, most spiritual talk becomes well disguised narcissism, well disguised.
Mm.
And of course, it's the 12th step. It's why we named our center here in New Mexico the Center for Action and Contemplation. I actually have often shocked people by putting the word action first.
Mm.
But until you complete the conduit, the outflow, it usually isn't, the other end of the conduit isn't open for the inflow.
Mm.
In other words, if you don't give it away, you don't keep it.
Mm. Mm.
I don't know why that's true, but it's true of the whole universe,
Mm.
this changing of forms between liquid and solid and vapor. It's
Such a mystery. So for those of you that actually, thank you for those that are watching that live here and actually told me to start posting on this channel. Thank you for giving me the goose. But this is really good. What Father Rohr is talking about here is that it's a mystery. The When I help others, when I serve others, just like my teacher who said, "For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. In my giving, I receive." And I tell that to people all the time in program. I'll say, "Hey, look, you're working your program. I'm working mine. Every human being is working their you know, they're on their own red roads." Um, but there is a consistent theme in almost every religion is this idea of giving to get. So
always got to be outflowing into another form, and that puts you in the circle. That puts you in the conduit of flow.
Mm.
It's if you stop the flow in any way by not giving it away,
Mm.
by not loving your neighbor, as we'd put it, and serving, as Jesus would even say, the least of the brothers and sisters. Or as he says in one of his parables, make sure you throw a party for those who can't repay you by throwing a party in return. Then it's pure flow, pure flow. Or as the Eastern traditions would say, acting without seeking the fruits of action.
Mm.
I serve because that's what I am. That's my existence. Not because this makes me look good, earns heaven, even because he needs it, but because it's true.
Mm.
I have to do the truth, you see.
me too, Tommy, me too. I see you, brother. You're like, ah. There's something there that I'll have to consider later on what Father Rohr was talking about, and I'll actually come back. Let's see, service about the 4:41 minute mark. I'll have to come back and listen to it again because I received an aha, and then caught Tommy's um, expression. I was like, okay, I'm not the only one.
Is that an actual quote from the Bible?
Yeah.
Throwing a party for
Yes,
those.
that's in, is that Luke's gospel? Jesus has a number of parables about wedding banquets. It seems to be his parable for eternal life. It's
Mm.
a giant wedding feast.
Mm.
And in one of them, he has people making up excuses so they don't have to come. And in one of them, I'm not sure if it's Luke or Matthew, he says, be sure to invite those who can't invite you in return and pay you back.
I
Brilliant.
just, God,
Brilliant.
I love it. I just love that. That's going to become a favorite.
Hey, I'm sorry I don't have the exact citation. The good evangelicals will know exactly where that comes from.
Yes. Going back to prayer.
You hear that? For those of you that self-identify as an evangelical, you hear that? Good things from every part of the body. Um, Take into consideration our Catholic brother here and our brother who said he's from the Jewish people, but he's not practicing. We can all learn from one another.
For just a moment. Um, a lot of people that I speak with have um, they have a hard time with prayer, not in the sense of it's weird to them or they don't want to do it. They want to do it, but they actually don't know how to do it or how to be effective with it. Um, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it gives some very basic instructions, obviously, which can be expanded upon, and um, the instructions there are basically not praying for something for yourself, but praying for others. Unless in praying for your own success, it leads to the success or well-being of others or something like that.
Good way to put it. Yeah.
But I find that people really confused about the actual act of prayer.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody who believes wholeheartedly in the power of prayer, its place and its effectiveness as a human being. So if we could maybe speak practically about that.
Well, that's what I was just starting to get to when I said we made it into a functional problem solving thing. And that's why the word became trivialized. Not that that's wrong. There's a place for, we call that intercessory prayer, where you intercede for the need of another person. That gets you out of your self-centeredness in early stage. But the trouble is, God becomes your little personal worker to get done what you can't get done. Whereas the higher forms of prayer were prayers of adoration, praise, and gratitude, where I'm not asking for anything. I'm just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. It's pure flow of praise or adoration or gratitude.
Yes.
That's much more contemplative prayer, which has little to do with intercession anymore. It's just remaining in the flow, so you are a conduit of life coming into the world through you and life coming toward the world out of you. That would be pure prayer. And that's why, some of the saints would say you can pray always. Now it's not verbal, it's not even mental. It's once you get in that stance, it's a life stance of openness and receptivity on both ends. You really can walk down the street, drive the car, sit on the toilet, and be praying. The distinction between sacred and profane falls apart.
Unreal. Unreal. I'll have to come back to this spot too. That's why I was like, um, he just gave me another aha moment. But I wanted to add in the right here talking about prayer. In as a recovering Pentecostal charismatic, one of the things that we were prided ourselves on was prayer and fasting, things like that. And I always thought, we're not, we talk a good game, but we're not even getting to that pray, pray unceasingly, that portion of scripture, that teaching. We never got there, and what Father Rohr is talking about here is a different way of being, and I like it. I gotta see if he's got any more content that unpacks this further.
Churchiness is just to get you started. That's all. But you can pray always.
It's very much a state of being.
There you go. That's it. That's it.
Yes. I want to talk about quickly, if you don't mind, about shame.
Oh, good.
It's such a problem for people who are getting better from addiction.
Yes.
I think shame, for many people that I've spoken to, sounds like I'm not good.
I'm not good.
I'm not good. I'm. If people knew I couldn't be loved, I couldn't be accepted, I'm not lovable. If you really knew me and you knew what I'm capable of, you couldn't possibly love me. Those kinds of thoughts. And then the extreme of that is I'm not lovable in God's eyes. Even God can't forgive what this is. What would you say to a person like that? People who carry those kinds of that inner dialogue.
Well, you stated it so well, and my sadness is how universal that shame is.
Mm,
I, as a Christian, feel we, in great part, and I mean this, we're responsible for giving that worldview. I find Jews less shame based than Christians, in
mm,
my experience,
mm,
because we so used the Bible, Jesus, unbelievably, uh, to in our parenting to shame the child into submission.
mm,
And that shame that you learned as a little boy or a little girl is just you're hardwired to feel inadequate, insecure. Whereas the whole point of the good news, the gospel, was to tell you your objective, metaphysical, ontological identity is good.
mm,
Where do we get that? From Genesis. 6 times in a row, Genesis says God created it and it was good. God created it and it was good. God created it. And then the creation of man or humanity, and it was very good. Now we came along with this positive foundation that the first book in the Bible gave us, and we emphasized instead of original blessing, original sin.
mm,
I don't know, you probably didn't grow up with that vocabulary, but we Christians did, all
mm,
right? It isn't even a word that's ever in the Bible. But when you start with the problem, you start by reminding people that they are inadequate.
mm,
Now we're 2,000 years into this. Or, now the mystics and saints are those who broke out of it.
mm,
But the common garden variety Christianity was often what we used to refer to as fire and brimstone. Right,
mm,
reminding people what sinners they were. You know,
mm.
Like we didn't already even know. Like we forgot.
see, Christianity or any religion is not a moral matter, it's a mystical matter. That if we would have emphasized the mystical goodness and union, we would have cut shame at the very beginning.
Mm,
But I blame it a lot on parenting. That,
mm,
and I shouldn't be blaming anybody.
mm.
You know, I'm sure if I
Keep talking, brother. You're speaking right to me.
had 3 little screaming kids around the house, I would I would resort to shaming and blaming and screaming and you know,
Who knows?
yeah, uh, it sort of works at that level.
Mm,
But the trouble is that is so internalized in most of us.
mm,
The fear of being inadequate, even in our parents' eyes, or being unlovable, even in our parents' eyes. And most, when I start spiritual direction with a person, you can presume, Tommy, that 90% of a person's operative God image is a combination of their mom and their dad. It has little to do with the great infinite God of mercy,
yes.
and
Yes.
grace.
Yes.
It's all, and you just learn that in working with people.
Mm,
Where did that come from? Well, you find out that's the way their mom was or their dad was. I'm not trying to blame mom and dad,
mm,
but what your prayer life does is leads you to an inner experience of God that leads you far beyond the faulty first hardwiring. And it does become hardwiring
yes.
that came from your early parenting.
Yes. I appreciate the idea that prayer and other practices can lead you out of shame to the healing.
I think it's
And they can. They can. For those of you that are watching this that are working on your sobriety, like me, um, I'm gonna probably deep dive on this at some point. So be watching out for a video for that. This shame here. You've heard me share in my lectures how I drove one son away with rules, and I drove the other one away with grace. In both places, I was not there, and so I don't beat myself up about it. I just know that it's going to make me it's making me a different father now with my adult son that's still here, and it's making me a different father with my adult son that is with the creator in the beautiful country in that large house, and he has his own space. It's making me a different parent now. So
major way.
Yes.
No, well, God can do anything through great love and great suffering. But what prayer is how do you maintain what you learned in great love and great suffering for the long haul?
Mm.
Otherwise, you have it for a few minutes. There's that Teflon again.
Yes.
And prayer rewires this so I can live there permanently.
Mm.
See?
I think that's why we in 12-step circles live or try to live by this process of one day at a time.
Very good.
We have to do it again every day.
Every day. Me too. Me
Have a
too.
chronic amnesia.
Yeah, and some of you have heard me say that when Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson built and designed this, from the Oxford group and, how it came to be what it is now, um, they spiritually appropriated in a good way. They spiritually appropriated a Hebrew teaching, and all we have is today. I'm not promised I'm going to, none of us are getting out of this alive, but I'm not promised that I'm going to make it to the end of the day. An hour from now is when somebody's going to make the journey. An hour from now could be, it's one day at a time. We worry about, like the teacher said, um, don't worry about tomorrow. Focus on today. That's got enough, so.
I'll coach you on that.
It's terrible. Well, the last thing I wanted to bring up in our time together today was if you could give some instruction. I know that one of the challenges for some people in getting into a 12-step landscape or a religious landscape or a spiritual path tradition is that sometimes we can sense dogma, fundamentalism. When I speak to you, I feel a great openness.
Hmm.
I feel attracted to learning more about the way you present these ideas, learning more about these teachings, because I don't feel an ounce of fundamentalism in there. But if I come up against a fundamental person who is really rigidly grasping a doctrine or a set of beliefs, and they're inviting in the sense of, come and believe this, it seems like, there's a group of people out here, myself being one of them, that really doesn't work for me unless I'm given an opportunity to develop an understanding and a belief system of my own.
Yeah.
How to deal with this, because I say to people all the time, listen, what have you heard about the 12 steps that's so off-putting?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh God, some of the dogmatic beliefs, and oh, once an addict, always an addict, and oh, the God thing is a problem for me. And I say, look, you're going to be given an opportunity to figure it out for yourself through it in a beautiful open container. But unfortunately, it's not always presented that way.
I predict that in the next 100 years, more and more religion is going to move to the practice level instead of the belief level. Beliefs are always something you can argue about, or look at the negative energy they're wasting on saying, I don't want to believe in God, or I don't want to believe in your dogmas. Let's just absent ourselves from that whole battle. I don't need to make you believe in anything. I really don't. But let me give you this practice. Here's where Buddhism is teaching a lot of us. Now, we had this in the Desert Fathers and Mothers and the mystics in the Catholic Church, but that was never mainline Catholicism or mainline Christianity. Protestantism, which came along in the later period, was almost entirely coterminous with the invention of the printing press, the Enlightenment, moving into the head. So Christianity became all about words and ideas and beliefs and dogmas and doctrines, and there weren't a lot of practices. So have you ever seen those little books by the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron?
Of course. Yeah. Love her work.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I mean, there's nothing to argue about. You just read one of her little 3-page chapters. She says, try this. Go do that. And there's nothing to argue about. You cannot disagree with it until you've done it, or you can't agree with it until you've done it. And of course, a lot of stubborn people, well, that's just stupid. I'm not going to try it. Okay, then.
Right.
then you're choosing to remain stupid, you know. So I think if we move, we call this orthopraxy. Now, again, this was where Franciscanism, you quoted at the beginning, was called an alternative orthodoxy
Mm.
inside of Christianity. Francis didn't fight about dogmas and doctrines and beliefs.
Mm.
He just said, go out and work with the lepers. That was his practice to begin with. Work with the poor people, and you'll know all you need to know.
Mm.
You know, that's orthopraxy.
Mm.
And see, the recovery movement is saying the same thing. Try to help at least one other alcoholic. Get inside of his pain, his suffering, and he will be your teacher. You know, that's what I mean by practices.
Mm.
It's it's the only way we're going to get out of this trap of fighting about dogmas and doctrines.
Mm.
And you know, I'm afraid even a lot of people who fight the recovery movement,
Mm.
they're still trapped inside of the argumentative mind.
Mm.
They want to have something to dismiss. They want to have something to be cynical about. What would you be like if there was nothing to be cynical about, nothing to be dismissive of? Reality is what it is, what it is, and everything has something to teach me, everything, including the recovery movement.
Mm.
Just that little bit of opening could be all they need to discover their own heart.
Mm.
But
Thank you.
the ego likes no rather than yes. It really does.
Mm.
The soul likes to say yes. The ego likes to say no.
Mm. I find it hard to believe we're through an hour already. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
easy to talk with.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Father Richard. I'm
You.
grateful to you for your time and presence. Thank you for lending your voice to the Recovery 2.0 conference. I would offer up a prayer, Father, may the war and the battle be over.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're
I think
a beautiful man.
I'm going to
talk.
thank you. So great to talk to you too. How can people connect with you and your work?
We're based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Center for Action and Contemplation. Our website is CAC, Center for Action, CAC.org, if they want to check us out.
Okay, thank you. They will want to check you out.
Eyes shine, Tommy. You're doing something right.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
God bless you, brother.
Bless.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm gonna click into his splash page here, just so you can kind of see his. So go check him out. Looks like he has some good thought leaders. Not thought leaders. Like he's got Gabor Mate. I'm gonna definitely listen to that one. But I wanted to listen to this one and do kind of like a on the fly reaction video. So closing thoughts before I close this down. 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes. Yeah, let's do it. So one of the things that I think is really, really cool about what I took part of right here, or what we watched, is to me it just kind of expanded some of the things and really confirmed some of the things that I've been thinking about for quite some time. And so I liked it. As you saw, real time, I subscribed to Tommy Rosen's channel. I added this video to to my favorites because I'm going to go back and drill down on a couple, zoom in on a couple points. So for those of you that are working on your sobriety, some of you heard me say in lecture or whatever, heard me speak, and I told you you could be the one. You could be the one that gets 6 weeks, gets 6 months, gets 6 years. I still believe that. I still believe that all the power is within you, like our relatives said, Tommy said, and Father Rohr said. Um, every person that Jesus healed, he said that your faith made you well. And then he talks about the kingdom of God is within us. Now, I don't know. All I can do is listen to these subject matter experts and then pass these resources along to you. So I'm learning with you. And I pray that you'll continue to just work on today, like what was highlighted. So I'm going to cut this video short, and then we'll see you next time. Now, let me make sure that I have everything going here. All right. It helps me edit things. So thanks for listening.